Hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel, The Bold and Beautiful Always, and today we've got something really exciting for you. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Let's jump right in. The gavel had not even dropped yet, and still the courtroom air was thick with anticipation, tension clinging to every marble column and mahogany bench like a second skin, reporters whispering feverishly into microphones, camera flashes snapping like lightning as Grace Buckingham, once the poised, calculating, and fiercely protective mother of Paris and Zoe, always dressed impeccably, always in control, always playing a long game built on lies, manipulation, and maternal ambition, sat handcuffed. At the defense table, her eyes darting around the packed courtroom, jaw tight, eyes narrowed with silent fury, her fingers trembling slightly despite her best efforts to maintain the facade of steely grace that had carried her through years of bending morality in the name of family, of legacy, of control. But now all of it had unraveled, thread by damning thread, until she found herself here, facing the cold weight of judgment and the devastating reality that she could be spending the next decade behind bars, not because of a random mistake, not because of a single misstep, but because the man she had underestimated the most, Dr. John Finnegan, had dared to see through her lies, to connect the dots no one else had thought to examine, and had the courage to act, even when the truth threatened to destroy everything he thought he knew about the woman who had inserted herself so ruthlessly into his family's life. It had started quietly, as most tragedies do, not with a bang, but with a subtle shift, a quiet moment where Finn began noticing inconsistencies in Grace's behavior, her sudden appearances at the hospital with thin excuses, her subtle but pointed questions about medical records, her manipulative nudges regarding Luna and Lee, and most troubling of all, the strange case of missing pain medications, altered patient files, and a forged signature on a set of confidential documents meant only for the chief of staff's eyes, documents that, when cross-referenced, suggested something far more insidious than bureaucratic error, the trafficking of high-value pharmaceuticals through a falsified charity program set up by Grace herself, under the guise of community outreach, with forged prescriptions, ghost patients, and a trail that led not to low-income clinics as claimed, but to a private offshore account in her name and an empty warehouse tied to a shell corporation in Nevada. At first, Finn didn't want to believe it. The mother of Paris, his sister-in-law, and Zoe, once almost his wife's rival, could be capable of such deception. But as the evidence mounted, and as his instincts as both a doctor and a protector of truth took over, he knew he had to act, and so he began collecting proof quietly, secretly, cross-referencing records, pulling surveillance footage, and finally confronting her late one night in the hospital boardroom with a single manila envelope full of documents that made Grace's face go pale before she could gather herself enough to spit back venomous denials, calling him delusional, paranoid, desperate to stir drama. But Finn didn't waver, and when he turned the evidence over to authorities, the fallout was immediate and explosive. Grace was arrested at her Beverly Hills home in full view of paparazzi and shocked neighbors. Her mugshot splashed across tabloids and news outlets before the ink on the warrant had dried, and the scandal rocked the Forrester and Buckingham families to their core. Paris was devastated. Unable to believe her mother, the woman who had always championed ambition and education and doing what's best for the family, could be a criminal, a fraudster, and Zoe, called back from London, collapsed in tears during her first visit to the jail, screaming that she didn't even know who her mother was anymore, while Grace remained stone-faced, unrepentant, clinging to the belief that she had done what she had to do to survive in a world that punished black women for being bold, for being smart, for playing the same games white men had played for centuries. But even that argument couldn't hold against the weight of the evidence Finn had exposed: wire transfers, surveillance video, paper trails she thought had been burned, and worst of all, an anonymous whistleblower testimony that confirmed she had leveraged her position as a medical consultant to push patients toward specific prescriptions and then redirected those drugs to the black market. The trial became a media circus. Celebrities offering commentary, fans speculating whether Grace would plead guilty, insiders suggesting she would try to throw someone else under the bus, possibly Poppy, or even Lee. But when the prosecution called Finn to the stand, his testimony was surgical, precise, devastatingly calm, describing in exacting detail how he discovered the discrepancies, what he saw in Grace's behavior, and how she had tried to threaten him into silence by suggesting she knew secrets about Lee's time in the psych ward, about Luna's paternity, even about Sheila, none of which he allowed to rattle him, because he knew the truth would win out, and when he stepped down from the witness stand, the courtroom felt like it had shifted irreversibly, like something had cracked open and poured light into all the dark corners Grace had tried so desperately to keep hidden. And when the verdict came, the words guilty on all counts echoed like thunder, and Grace didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't beg for mercy, she just stared at the floor, lips pressed into a bitter line as the judge pronounced her sentence. 10 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole, a full decade stripped from her life, her reputation obliterated, her daughters estranged, and her legacy reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale. As she was led away in handcuffs, reporters shouting questions she no longer had the power to ignore, Finn stood in the back of the courtroom, quietly holding Steffi's hand, knowing that what he had done had saved lives, had protected the hospital, had revealed the corruption hiding in plain sight, but also knowing that nothing about it felt victorious, because in the end, it was a tragedy, one born of ambition unchecked, love twisted into control, and a mother who had lost sight of what it meant to protect her children. And as the courtroom emptied, the whispers faded, and the doors closed behind Grace for the last time as a free woman, Finn couldn't help but wonder how many more secrets were still buried in the wreckage she left behind. Bill sat in Liam's room while Grace examined him. Liam was back in a joking mood and implied that Bill smelled, wondering if there were any scrubs for his dad. Liam stated, "I don't think my dad's left that chair in days. I had to fight the whole family to get in here." Bill stated, "I won't leave until you've recovered." Grace was pleased to learn that Liam's wound from the gunshot was healing well. Bill sat by Liam and took his hand. "I'm luckier than anyone else. I could have lost my son, and it would have been all my fault. I got Luna pardoned and unleashed her on my family," Bill told Liam, who assured Bill it was over now and he didn't blame him. After that, Bill inquired as to why Liam had not informed him of the brain tumor. "Liam, I'm not to blame for keeping me in the dark. The way I dealt with you and the choices I made, I put the people I love in jeopardy," Bill explained. Liam assured his father that he did not intend to punish him. He just didn't want to burden Bill with his problems. "I didn't want my last moments to be spent mourning," Liam said. "It's hilarious. Getting shot and almost dying that way made me see I was not ready. I thought I was ready, but I'm not," Liam relayed. "I'm not ready to go, and I want to fight this." I reasoned, why should I let a brain tumor if Luna can't kill me? Isn't there always going to be another chapter? Grace then asked to speak to Bill privately. "Is there any real hope for my son, Dr. Buckingham?" Bill asked. "If I told you there is, you might ask." Grace responded. She shared the story of how she had been studying an experimental method. "It's not something this hospital could sign off on or even know about," Grace told Bill. Grace informed Bill that the procedure was costly, but Bill stated that the life of his son was priceless. Grace described the potential dangers of the procedure. She needed help convincing Liam to go through with it. "Don't worry. I'll get in touch with him," Bill promised. Bill later told Liam about the surgery. "It actually has a chance of working and not just delaying the inevitable?" Liam inquired. Grace told Liam that her colleague was on his way to Los Angeles to do the procedure if Liam wanted it. Liam agreed after hearing a little more from Grace. Bill would whisk him to another facility, and the surgery would be done the next day. In Eric's living room, Donna made sure to talk all about an upcoming Forrester Creations trip to Italy. "What about your sister? You think she'll go?" Taylor inquired. Donna thought that Brooke should go, since her showstopper moment was the talk of the fashion show a few months ago. Donna inquired about Taylor's reaction to the situation, giving the impression of genuine concern for her. "I trust the Forresters to make the right decisions for their company. And personally, I trust Ridge to honor his commitment to me. In addition, I was informed that another man from Brooke's past is currently in town. Nick Marone," stated Taylor. After everything that had transpired with Liam and Luna, Eric questioned Brooke in his office about whether or not she would be okay with leaving town for a few days. Ridge reassured them that Luna no longer posed any danger. He stated with sincerity, "Luna lived a violent life, and that's how she died." They could hardly believe that Liam had been battling brain cancer for months, despite marveling at how he saved the day. Eric concentrated once more on a business trip to Italy. He desired Brooke to accompany Ridge and him. Brooke grinned, I'm looking forward to making more beautiful memories in Italy. Eric couldn't help but talk about Brooke joining them on the trip after she left the office. It's not just going to be work. The beauty of Naples and Capri can't be ignored. You and Brooke should check it out, Eric suggested. He recalled how enchanting Italy had always been for Brooke and him. Ridge was just glad he could get Brooke away from Nick Marone, whom he described as an opportunist. Ridge seemed more preoccupied with his own feelings, according to Eric. Before Ridge got a chance to reply, Taylor appeared. Eric left them alone for a few minutes, so Taylor took the opportunity to ask Ridge to set a wedding date. Brooke was taken aback by Nick in the design office. He asked her how everyone was holding up after the shooting. Brooke was content to know that Liam would persevere. She then told Nick about the upcoming trip to Italy. Nick could not believe that she would accompany Forrester to Italy. Brooke insisted, "It is a trip for business." Nick said he wanted Brooke to fly with him because he also had business in Italy. Brooke objected, claiming that she would be far too preoccupied with business. Nick said he would be busy too. "But you know what I'm going to do," he stated. "I'm going to make time for you, the way you deserve to be treated." Bill sat motionless in the corner of Liam's hospital room, his usually commanding presence softened by the sheer vulnerability that had overtaken him in the past few days. The unshakable titan of Spencer Publications reduced to a father desperate to preserve the heartbeat of the son he'd nearly lost forever, while Grace moved expertly around the room, checking monitors, adjusting Liam's drip, and noting signs of steady healing. Liam, bandaged and visibly fatigued but bright-eyed nonetheless, cracked a joke through a pained but genuine smile, teasing his father with a playful jab. "I don't think my dad's left that chair in days, and it kinda smells like it," drawing a brief but much-needed chuckle from Grace, who was otherwise buried in charts and vitals, while Bill responded with mock indignation, brushing his lapel and quipping, "It's called loyalty, son. Something you'll be grateful for when you're my age and your kids start bossing you around too." And as the levity faded back into silence, Bill reached for Liam's hand, his grip firm but trembling, his voice uncharacteristically fragile as he admitted, "Nobody's feeling luckier than I am right now, kid. I could have lost my son, and it would have been all my fault. I got Luna pardoned, I let her back into our lives, and I unleashed her on this family." But Liam, ever the protector even in his frailty, shook his head slightly and replied with quiet conviction, "It's over now, Dad. I don't blame you. You were trying to give someone a second chance. That's never a bad thing." His words noble, perhaps too noble for someone who'd been shot by the very woman his father had trusted, and the guilt in Bill's eyes deepened as he looked at the son who, despite a bullet and a tumor, still found room for grace and forgiveness, prompting Bill to ask, after a beat of hesitation, "But why didn't you tell me? About the brain tumor?" "About everything." And Liam, blinking slowly, responded, "I wasn't trying to punish you, Dad. I didn't want my last moments to be spent mourning. I didn't want you to have to carry this." And as he glanced toward the window, the weight of his confession sinking in, he added, "Funny thing. Getting shot and almost dying that way, it made me realize I'm not ready to go. I thought I was. I made peace with it. But I'm not ready. If Luna couldn't kill me, why should I let a tumor do the job? There's gotta be another chapter ahead. There has to be." And Grace, sensing the opportunity, stepped in and asked Bill for a private word, motioning him just outside into the hallway where she laid out the full truth, how she'd been quietly researching an unapproved, experimental treatment, one that involved significant risk and a level of secrecy the hospital could never endorse, how the science was cutting edge and ethically questionable, but how the results in preliminary cases had been promising, and how she needed Bill's help. Not just financially but emotionally, to persuade Liam to try it, and Bill, already knowing his answer before she'd even finished, said with fierce conviction, "Money is no object. If there's hope, even a sliver, I'll buy the whole damn silver lining. Just tell me what you need." And with that, Grace assured him her colleague, an old associate from Johns Hopkins working off the grid, was en route to Los Angeles to perform the procedure if Liam agreed, and after rejoining Liam, the two of them, father and son, shared another heartfelt moment as Bill relayed what he had learned, and Liam, still wary but inspired by his own will to fight, agreed, saying, "If there's even a chance this works, I'll do it," prompting Grace to spring into action. Arranging the quiet transfer, booking the surgical space at a private clinic far from the watchful eyes of hospital administration, And the next morning, as the sun crept over the horizon, Bill held Liam's hand once more before the anesthesiologist stepped in, whispering, "Whatever happens, I'm proud of you." While Grace and her colleague began the delicate operation to remove the remaining mass that threatened Liam's life, and back at Forrester Creations, Hope, Steffi, and Carter convened in the conference room to discuss the latest developments, grappling with the miracle that Liam was still alive and potentially out of the woods, marveling at how a man who had already faced so much could summon the strength to carry on. And Brooke entered, her voice filled with conviction as she called Liam a true hero, especially for taking a bullet to save Steffi. While the conversation gradually turned to the future, Hope wondering aloud what this meant for their daughters, Steffi reflecting on how complicated things had become, Carter raising concerns about the emotional toll of it all, and Brooke quietly voicing a sentiment that had lingered in the corners of her mind. Maybe if more people had known, we could have helped too, to which Hope replied gently, Liam didn't want pity. He wanted dignity. And in that moment, a rare hush fell over the group as the enormity of Liam's private burden settled into the air around them, and at the hospital, Bridget returned to check on Liam only to find his bed empty, his belongings gone, and panic rising in her chest until a lab tech named April told her that Grace had authorized his release and Bill had taken him elsewhere, and moments later, Finn, ever the vigilant protector, learned the same and became suspicious, concerned about the unorthodox nature of the decision and deeply unsettled that Grace had moved Liam without full disclosure, and even as Bridget tried to reassure him that Bill would do anything for his son, Finn couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, and while all this unfolded, at Eric's mansion, Donna was planning an upcoming Forrester trip to Italy, chatting excitedly with Taylor about whether Brooke would attend, Taylor expressing cool confidence that Ridge was committed to her and that Brooke's presence was irrelevant, especially now that Nick Marone, another of Brooke's famous exes, was back in town, while in Eric's office. Ridge was more concerned with escaping the drama, glad to get Brooke out of town and away from Nick, whom he still viewed as an opportunist, and Eric couldn't help but push the romantic narrative, nudging Ridge toward reigniting the flame with Brooke in the enchanting Italian countryside, while across the hall in the design office, Nick himself surprised Brooke with an impromptu visit, expressing concern over Liam's condition and teasing her about going to Italy with Forrester, only to pivot and suggest they fly together since he too had business abroad, but Brooke, ever diplomatic, demurred, saying she'd be far too busy, though Nick pressed on, declaring, "I'll make time for you, Brooke. The way you deserve," and as she mulled over his words, her thoughts clearly torn between the stability Ridge offered and the passion Nick reignited, the drama elsewhere continued to spiral. Grace and her colleague, elbows deep in Liam's skull, delicately removing the tumor fragment by fragment while Bill stood outside clutching a coffee he hadn't tasted, praying with everything in him that he wouldn't lose another son, begging the universe in whispered sobs to take him instead, and when Grace finally emerged, her face weary but alight with cautious optimism, she delivered the news that Liam had survived, that the tumor had been removed, and that while recovery would be long, there was genuine hope that changed everything. Hope that turned mourning into rejoicing, and as word spread through the halls of Forrester and Spencer and Logan and Finnegan alike, the ripple effect was instant. Steffi wept quietly in Finn's arms, Hope hugged Brooke for longer than necessary, Carter clapped Ridge on the back in congratulation, even Thomas, wherever he was, smiled into the distance knowing that for once, life had chosen mercy over tragedy, and still, the questions remained: what next for Hope and Steffi, now united in fear but destined to compete again? What next for Brooke and Ridge? As the allure of Italy loomed and the ghost of Nick's affections stirred once more, what next for Bill, who had sacrificed everything, even his own soul, to save a son who now had a future? And what next for Liam, lying unconscious but alive, on the cusp of a second chance that would change the fate of everyone he loved?